How big of a 16 personalities nerd are you really? How deep does your knowledge go? Are you just a noob on the surface? Or are you obsessed? Have you taken the deep dive? The iceberg tier meme is a way of organizing knowledge about a particular subject. From the stuff at the tip of the iceberg that everybody and their mama knows, to the bottom of the iceberg where only the people who have put on their scuba equipment and gone really far down the rabbit hole have gone. I really just mixed images there. Put on your scuba equipment to go in a rabbit hole. So today we're going over the 16 personalities iceberg meme. Where are you on the iceberg? At the tippy top like a little baby? Or at the depths? I mean, considering that you are watching this video, you're pretty far down. Hate to break it to you. Let's start at tier 1. Like tier 1 imports. That's a dumb joke. Tier 1, top of the iceberg, everyone has some knowledge. If I ask anyone, have you heard of Myers-Briggs? Most people will say, yes, I have heard of it. A lot of these people will be like, I took the test at school or at work and I don't remember what type I am. At this tier, you might get some people who are like, oh yeah, I am the defender. They will not refer to their type by the letters because they probably can't remember them. They'll be like, what are the letters again? NTSB? But instead they'll use like the nickname that whatever website they took the test on gave their type. At this tier, you might find people who remember the letters of their type. They'll be like, I'm a INFP. But despite some people at this tier knowing their type, they don't really know what it means. Except for maybe the vaguest stereotype, like, oh, I'm INFP because I am messy or something. At this tier, you will also get people who say the Enneagram is better, which it is not. Get that opinion out of here. That is tier 1. None of you watching are in tier 1. Well, I hope not. Now let's move on to tier 2. We're going a little farther down the iceberg. Tier 2 is when they're actually a little bit interested in the 16 personalities and they have a little bit of knowledge. At this point, you might get people who are like, what's the best test to take? Because they're starting to realize there might be a lot of garbage out there. And that question makes me want to rap right now. People always be asking me, what test of personality should I take? I'm about to break it down. In this next segment, sponsored by Cloverleaf. I was trying to find a test on the internet, but the tests I was taking had me breaking a sweat. One wanted a fitty to give me the nitty gritty. I said, you're tripping, dog. Who do I look like, Rich Richie? Another had questions that were really confusing. I'm like, I don't even know which answer I should be choosing. So I went to Cloverleaf, took their reliable and free assessment for the 16 personalities. I get free coaching tips and a super sweet profile. And if I had a work team, we could get a free trial. So pour yourself a drink and click on my link. Take Cloverleaf. Test. And don't overthink. Yeah, pour yourself a drink and click my link. Take Cloverleaf's test. Cloverleaf. Word. Thanks to Cloverleaf for sponsoring that portion of the video. Now, back to my regular content. So continuing with tier 2, you will get people, once they have found a test that they like or whatever, they'll be like, my type really resonates with me. They'll be like, oh wow, the description of my type explains everything. My personality type is awesome. What personality type is my perfect partner? I really do not like people who are that type. And of course, that type is like half of the types. And at this tier, people will understand a little bit of the difference between the letters. A little bit, not a lot. They'll be like, oh, intuition, I sort of understand what that is as opposed to sensing, but if they're not gonna be able to explain it to you in a cogent way. They probably know the stereotypes of their type and maybe a few stereotypes of other types, but there are still some of the 16 personalities where they're like, I really don't know what's going on with this type or what that even looks like. They might know a few celebrity types, but they probably are not like correct. Then again, what is correct? They probably watch Frank James' 16 personality sketches, which are hilarious, and everyone should be watching. People at tier 2 also probably look at personality memes, but maybe don't understand all of them. So those two tiers are above the surface of the water, which is French for water. So now at this point, we have to don our scuba gear and go beneath the depths of the chilly, icy waters of the Arctic. And guess what? 99.7% of you watching right now are at this tier or lower. How's that feel? At tier 3, people are definitely now interested in the subject of the 16 personalities, and they are actively trying to acquire more knowledge. They want to learn it. And if you're at this tier, you have just enough knowledge to get in trouble. At this tier, the gloves are coming off. The first sign that you're at this tier is that you're watching the Frank James educational 16 personalities videos like this one. Hate to break it to you. Frank, you said 99.7, so what about that other 0.3? Those people are here by accident somehow. They don't know what I'm saying. They're confused. Tier 3, you understand the letters pretty well. You could probably explain to someone the difference between intuition and sensing in a very basic level at least. But I think people at this tier still have black and white thinking. I can't blame people for this because it's hard to get out of that way of thinking, but it's the sort of thing where you're like, oh, if you're a thinker, you don't have emotions. And it'll also be like, if you're a sensor, you are dumb. If you're an INFP, you must be depressed. Or the logical flip side of those things, if you are depressed, you must be an INFP. Also at this tier, people are like, Jesus and Hitler were INFJ. That's crazy, man. People will start discovering cognitive functions at this point. It's like, whoa, 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 whoa. Wait a second. There is more to this than just the letters? People at this tier kind of know all the stereotypes of all the 16 personalities. You might not know a lot about every type, but you can say at least, oh yeah, ISTP doesn't like talking to people and probably very smart. I don't even, I can barely describe it. They'll start using X's to talk about types more generally, even to the annoying degree of being like XXXJ, rather than just saying J types or judger. They'll try to type their friends and family, but they don't know enough about typology to really do that effectively, so everyone turns out being like an intuitive. Unless they don't like them, in which case they come out as a sensor. People at this tier, if they like someone, might be like, well, that person must be the same type as me, or very similar. Not everyone at this stage will do this, but this is when people start to tell other people they are mistyped without the other person asking. They'll be in a conversation and someone will be like, oh, I'm an INTJ, and they'll be like, I don't think you are. I think you're probably INTP. Those people only get worse from here. Some people at this stage will even start a YouTube channel about typology. Although if I'm being honest, I was like at tier 1 when I started this channel. I was at tier 1 imports when I started this channel 5 years ago. Hold on to your butts, we're going to tier 4. We're getting down into the chilly depths. It's so cold down here. The fishes are going by that are bones, like in the Mario game. You know what I'm talking about? It made a lot more sense before I said it. At depth level 4, you are solidly a nerd. At this point, you probably have heard that Carl Jung is the granddaddy of all of this stuff. And you might be like, oh, I should check that out. I should get into that, but it seems a little complicated. So you start at other places. Maybe you actually read a Myers-Briggs book, or maybe people at this level might get certified by the MBTI company. At this point, you probably realize that the 16personalities.com test is not like a real Myers-Briggs test. And you realize that if you say the A or the T at the end of your type, you look a little bit silly. You realize that the real connoisseurs of typology never use that. At this point, you probably have a basic understanding of the 8 cognitive functions and the cognitive stack. And if you want to learn that, you can check out my video right here explaining all the cognitive functions and everything you need to know about it. At this point, you don't necessarily have everything memorized about cognitive functions, but you know what they are. You're not like surprised when someone says introverted sensing. This tier is also difficult because this is the point where many people are like, maybe I'm not the type I thought I was. These doubts about your type basically come from this new knowledge of cognitive functions and starting to understand, oh, this type that I have thought I am all along, the cognitive functions are working in a way that I don't necessarily recognize in myself. Your world is shattered. You get filled with dread and anxiety. Is your life a lie? At this point, you might silently start thinking everyone is mistyped. Some of the big mouths from the previous tier who like to tell everyone they're mistyped might have realized by now, oh, I should have a little humility because maybe I'm the wrong type. People at this tier will be slipping personality types into everyday conversation. They will also start looking for alternative schools of thought when it comes to typology, because there's a lot out there besides just like standard Myers-Briggs. People at this tier are really looking for a system or someone who can explain it to them that really just makes horse sense. I was gonna say perfect sense, and then I was like, no, I'm gonna say horse sense for the horse fans watching. At this point, you also start trying to type people around you like in the previous tiers, but you start to realize everyone does everything. You lose some of that black and white thinking. You're like, I thought this person was a thinker, but now they're like talking about emotions. What the heck? Okay, number 5, advanced. We're getting advanced. We are going so far down, the sunlight is having a hard time penetrating the dark waters. People at this level know the cognitive functions for every type backwards and forwards. If I tell you quick, what's the function stack for an ISTJ, you'll be able to say introverted sensing, extroverted thinking, introverted feeling. Frank, you don't know what you're talking about. You imposter. At this point, you start to know stuff that's a bit more advanced, like the temperaments, like the function pairs, like the family is also known as the quadra. I have made videos on all of those topics. If you want to check it out, I guess I could put it in the something below. The description, the pinned comment. At this point, you have to stop yourself from slipping obscure personality language into everyday conversation. Like at the previous tier, you would like be very aware of it. You're like, oh, that guy's probably ESTP. But now it's like you have to actively prevent yourself from being like, oh, that guy's clearly got inferior FE. Another interesting thing at this point is that when you see a walking stereotype of one of the 16 personalities, which at this point you realize is actually somewhat rare, it makes you laugh. Because when you start to realize all the complexities and everything, it amazes you when one of just like the dumb stereotypes walks into a room and you laugh so that you may not cry. At this stage, you also move from, oh no, I don't know what my type is, to my type is irrelevant. You kind of lose that anxiety and you're just like, I'll figure out my type eventually, what does it matter? Which might surprise you, but I do think that there's a point where you're going through this typology journey and you're like, I'm more interested in just learning it and obtaining the knowledge more so than I am using it for my own development. But I don't know, maybe that's more of an introverted thinking kind of approach. Okay, folks, we're at the bottom tier. We're at tier 6. This is where it gets freaky. This is where people get jiggy with it. These people are far gone. There is no hope for these people. So if you do not want to go to this point, do not watch the rest of the video. Viewer discretion is advised for the 6th tier. Just by telling you about the bottom tier, I am basically making it so that you are going to reach it. Because if your curiosity is piqued by stuff in the 6th tier, you are going to want to learn it, at which point you will be at the 6th tier and there will be no saving you. There's one thing in particular in this 6th tier that I almost don't want to put in this video because I know people are going to start asking me about it. But I'm going to put it here. Tier 6, you're far gone, right? Forget about it. At this point, you have come back to being like, I'm fairly certain about my type. But if someone wanted to prove something else, that would be fine. I don't care. I'm pretty certain of my type. The thing is, you're like, I hate my type. It is impossible to get this far into typology and still have that same attitude that people have at the beginning where it's like, my type is the best, I love my type. No, at this point you're like, I kind of wish I could be any other type. Or at the very least, you will have a cognitive function that you are like, I hate this cognitive function. I wish I did not have it. Another thing at this tier is you start catching yourself doing stuff all the time that is related to your type. And sometimes you're like, oh, that's funny. But other times you're like, I hate my type. At this point, people also start to get into like obscure theories and stuff. They'll get into like the subtypes of the types and subtypes of the subtypes, etc. Some people at this tier are very well versed in Carl Jung and always go back to him. They'll be like, well, Jung said this, so this is what this has to be. Sometimes at level 6, you get people who are very far into like the official MBTI stuff, but they usually have gone like back to, you know, the very original writings from Myers-Briggs. At this stage, it is impossible to have any interaction with any other human being or even just like watch a TV show without thinking about type. This is one of the things that's tough about type, is that it's this thing that's switched on in your brain that never goes away. Which is not the worst thing in the world. On the plus side, it makes it so that almost anything can be interesting. People at this tier can like watch any dumb TV show or listen to a podcast that they don't care about the subject matter because they can use it as a chance to listen for type. At this tier, inevitably, people also get into something very controversial: visual typing. And at first it sounds stupid and dumb. And to a degree, it is. The idea though is that there are certain physical traits that are attributable to certain cognitive functions, that people of a certain type might kind of look similar. As the most basic example, you might have heard of an FE smile versus an FI smile. Basically that if someone has extroverted feeling, they'll have this big dumb smile. Like this. But if someone has introverted feeling, their smile will be like a little less Hollywood. It'll be more like, I don't even know, player. The thing about visual typing is that there are always exceptions, which makes it kind of dumb. The fact that it's inconsistent makes you want to figure it out, so you just think about it all the time. I know people are gonna be like, make a whole video about that, but I don't know, it seems dangerous. But that's never stopped me before. And the last thing, once you get to this level, this depth of interest and knowledge into the 16 personalities, and you've probably heard me making references to it throughout this tier, is that you start to realize maybe this isn't real. Maybe it's just all in my head. Maybe all of us who are into this are just making stuff up. But you know what? The funny thing about being at this tier is you're like, okay. It might be real, it might not be real, I still find it interesting, and I'm still gonna use it. Now, what will push each of the 16 personalities to confront you? Check out the answer to that video. Guys, my brain is fried. I'm trying to say, click this video. Stay cool and attractive.